Another Friday and another episode with Steve talking about everything training related. In a past episode, we spoke about how to build your training program and get started in the gym. But a lot of people get started in the gym and don't know where to go. They feel lost about how to make progress in the gym, how to maximize each set, each rep of your workout, and then how you can build on that week by week. On this episode of Self-Made Podcast, we discuss just that. We talk about progressive overload. We talk about acute overload and how to maximize the individual session. We talk about what are the key drivers of hypertrophy and how you maximize them. We talk about does soreness equal a good workout, as well as Steve's really entertaining rant about why eccentric chin-ups aren't very good for building chin-up performance. This is a fantastic episode where you really learn how to maximize your training tomorrow and for the long term. If you enjoy the show, please share on social media, tagging myself and Steve. And if you could leave a review on your favorite podcast platform, we will really, really appreciate it. But I will leave you with myself and Steve Collins. So Steve, welcome back to the show. We've spoken in our first couple of episodes about how to build a training program. But now we've got people getting that in place and maybe getting started in the training. I think it'd be good to just talk progression, because I think this is something where people kind of assume some things are progression or expect this to be, or don't even know how to progress their workouts. You just end up in the same workout over and over and over again and not getting anywhere. So in your mind, what are the key things you're looking for to get? Let's start with the workout itself. What do you determine as a successful workout for a client? How do you know that workout's been good?
Well, there obviously, when you do a workout and you have a goal to work towards, there are specific acute variables that we're trying to track, monitor, and progress on, right? Such as, everyone knows, 3 sets of 10. All right, let's make sure we get those 3 sets of 10 in. And if we're not, then we need to tweak something, whether that's the load or the speed of movement, which is another variable that we call tempo, or manipulate the rest period. There's all these variables that we can manipulate to control our training progression so that we improve. So I think that's the simplest way to answer that question.
I remember reading Mike Isseltel's book on hypertrophy, and they break it down into acute overload and progressive overload. And I like that way of looking at it, because a lot of people, progressive overload is a buzzword in the industry at the moment, where everyone is talking about, okay, we've got to make sure progressive overload. And you watch these people train and they train like shit. And acute overload is missed, right? Before we talk how to progress this stimulus, is the stimulus you're actually getting sufficient in that workout? If the workout itself is crap, I don't give a toss how we progress that workout. And when I look at one of the things that we're saying there, like the research at the moment, is that mechanical tension is the biggest driver of hypertrophy, more than metabolic stress, more than muscle damage. And a lot of the stuff that's coming out at the moment is you have to be like 1 to 5 reps. If your goal is to build tissue, 1 to 5 reps away from failure. Now, whether that's a 50 rep set or whether that's a 6 rep set, anywhere between those two things is good enough. But obviously, if you're doing 50 rep sets, it's going to be a 4-hour workout. And if you're doing less than 5, it's probably going to bang your nervous system and your joints up. So our aim, I think, I presume most people are looking at this, and we'll talk strength later. I probably want to build muscle. We need to ensure that we safely get people to that 1 to 5 reps in reserve. So when you're getting your clients who want to build tissue, how are you doing that? How do you ensure they get to that point safely?
Well, the simple way of doing it is using a specific percentage, obviously, of what you might deem to be their 1 rep max as an estimation. You don't have to test it, obviously. You can gauge that off different things. And then give them an RPE, like a rate of perceived exertion. So how hard are they working in that set? What do they perceive their level of intensity as? Well, but there's a problem with that, is that it's subjective, right? So as we've spoken about before, beginners aren't aware of what hard work is. And actually, one of the best things that I've been doing in the last few months since you told me that you're doing this with your clients is using a set to failure. And it's worked wonders for my beginner clients and intermediate clients. All right, a set to failure sounds crazy, but for beginners, they can do it. It teaches them how to grind, work hard, gives them, mental fortitude. But it teaches the client something, because I'm giving people 3 sets of 10 on a dumbbell press, right? And then I give them the 4th set. All right, now we're going to go max effort. And they're getting 15, 20, 25 reps out from what was 8 to 10 and struggle. So it teaches them, all right, well, that's what hard work was. And now you're pushing to a max effort. And now I'm aware as a coach of what you can really push to. And now you're understanding what an RPE scale actually is. So thanks for telling me about that.
Yeah, no problem. I mean, I think
using
things like that, like challenge sets, I think are so valuable, because progressive overload is a buzzword in the industry at the moment. So is reps and reserve, right? This is a big Mike Isotel thing. We have to go to like 1 to 3 reps and reserve. And you're right. And I agree. But if you don't know what 0 reps and reserve is, how do you know what 1 is?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
It's like, how do you know if you're burnt out if you don't put, like, how do you know what a burnout is? If you're avoiding burnout in your job, but you never worked hard enough to get anywhere close to it, then you could probably work harder. It's exactly the same thing when it comes to training. So I like those sort of like pushing people past that, because especially if there's any new coaches listening to this, it's a skill. I bet nowadays you can just pick a weight and it's probably right. Like when we talk about 1 rep maxes and a potential 1 rep maxes, right? I'm presuming most of your beginners, you're not testing 1 rep maxes because it wouldn't be safe to do so. So you now have an eye and you just like, it's hard to explain to somebody how to do it, because you got to go, you pick up the weight and you give it them and it's nearly always right. So doing something like that means if they go over 3 reps, let's say you got 3 sets of 10 as you used, if they do more than 3 reps on that last set, you can increase the weight next set. If they don't hit the rep range, it was too heavy. If they get 1 or 2 more, perfect. So like, what do you do in terms of like maximizing the set? How do you make sure someone can safely get to technical or muscular failure? Because this is the thing, right? Because what happens with beginners often is they have no stability. I'm giving you the answer here, but they have all this sort of stuff. How do you make sure that somebody is in a position to push hard enough to get that response?
Well, first of all, so for anyone that doesn't understand, the overload principle is basically, in order for you to progress, you have to put the body under a certain amount of stress, and then it will adapt, providing we recover, etc. General adaptation syndrome, right? The gas principle. But to describe, you can use a fit model to describe how we may apply additional stress, and that's the FITT model, which is your frequency, your intensity, your time, and your type of training that, like exercise that you use. Yeah. So the simple one is, we can manipulate the reps, the load, and like how difficult the exercise is that way. And you can even change the type of exercise. So you can, change in moment arms to make something harder. So you can tweak that sort of stuff. But first and foremost, technique needs to be down, and then we can apply more stress to progress. But there's also implications for progressive overload. Like, people think progressive overload is just simply adding more resistance, when it's not. It's I like to think, like, can we progress tension? All right, there's different ways to progress tension, like we can take the same weight, and to progress this next week, we can just move that weight faster. Right?
Or the opposite. With the beginners, often I always look at this like an inverted U. With beginners, my progression is moving slower. My progression is, can I put more tension on this muscle? Because I could add load to a bench press, and you could, in theory, on paper, your logbook says you're progressively overloading. But what are you progressively overloading? Are you progressively overloading your chest? Or are you progressively overloading your delts? Now, there could be a structural component in this, right? There could be the fact that you've got a really, really flat rib cage, and maybe bench press isn't the best exercise for you. But there are so many people out there that don't know how to actually do the bench press properly to create tension. Learning to slow down and putting more tension week on week in the same sets, reps, and load will do more for your chest training than any logbook progression ever will in those early stages. And then when you've nailed that down, you can go quicker, you can add loads, you can add sets, you can add reps, you can do whatever. Because I've seen it, like how people talk about beginner growth. I think the beginner growth, and I don't know if you probably agree with me, I don't know if you know or not, but I think beginner growth is isolated to beginners. I think beginner growth comes from when a tissue is stimulated for the first time. I've known people that have been training for years and are fairly well developed. They have never been able to grow. Their chest is always the one, right? Because people practice terribly. And I teach them how to gauge their chest or find an exercise that best suits their mechanics, and their chest goes really quickly. They haven't added more weight. They've just
I totally like that. It's like biological age and then training age, right? Like some people they might be 50, but they have a poor training age and experience, right? So then they get exposed to true tension and training and they progress. But check this, like, I've had a back and knee injury for a few years now, and I haven't been able to maximize my training. I also haven't had any whey protein, and I haven't for about 3 years. And I've just been sort of just floating with my nutrition, not, proper nutrition. And then the last 6-7 weeks, I started following an old program that I had from John Meadows. So it's a real pure bodybuilding.
Brutal,
program.
high volume.
High volume. I feel like I've got sunburn every day. Yeah, and again, it's a lot of challenge sets, like we spoke about. It's one of the reasons that I started doing this with my clients as well. Like you mentioned it, and then in the program, the first week I had fucking challenge sets on my leg extension. You know what I mean? Blood flow restriction challenge sets, as many reps as I could, for fuck's sake. But I'm loving it. And in 4 weeks, I started to eat better, more calories, the right amount of calories, more protein, and I started taking whey protein again, and I put about 4 kilos on in 5 weeks. You know what I mean? So,
how much do you think that's placebo, like psychology, in the sense of, because I see this like all the time with clients.
Yeah.
When you get them to love training and when you train them hard, this is such a value to training a client hard, because they leave and they go, I don't want to ruin that session. So you going into a high volume block, which is a bit alien to you because you're so used to strength stuff, and you can kind of do the strength stuff in your sleep, doing something that's out of your comfort zone that is hard. You go, I don't want to, is it the nutrition that's the training that's enabled you to eat better? Or is it because the training's so hard, you go, I don't want to eat shit after that?
It's definitely both, like, and also like, like social dynamics as well. Like the missus is trying to diet and eat well. You know what I'm saying? So that helps as well. You know what I mean? Or I don't feel like having, I haven't had any alcohol for 5 weeks, which is rare for me, but I feel good. I feel really, really good. I'm sleeping good and I'm training really well. And I've got good energy and recovery. So, you know what I mean? And I'm an experienced trainee, So those are other factors that I've just tweaked that you wouldn't think may affect me that much, but they big time did,
Yeah. Do you think another thing that affects people in the set to get that acute response, just like enough of a stimulus? Do you think a lot of coaches progress their clients too fast, so they have an exercise that it's too advanced for them, so they can't create that tension?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, big time. And that's like when they say like the art of training, right? The art of being able to train someone and the art of manipulating these principles and techniques. You know what I mean? Like, again, you can change the type of exercise to make something more stressful, like tweak how they may be creating moment arms or, you know what I mean? Stuff like that, different barbells and stuff like that. And people don't really know how to progress that.
I have a love-hate relationship with the big 3 barbell lifts, and this is where we might disagree.
Yeah, I do as well. Now. Yeah, I feel like as I become more experienced as a coach and more experienced within my own training, I use the barbell less and less every week.
Yeah, I like it. I like it from a perspective of, because I went away from them completely when I went into the mechanic stuff. Like I said, like so few people are gifted to do these when the goal is body composition. Put powerlifting aside because you need to do them. So I was like, I never do them. And then I started thinking, well, I love the fact that there's a skill component to squat, bench, and deadlift. That it's something that you can have longevity in your training. So when you're not focused on, I need to get leaner or I need to get bigger, to just make your training fun for years on end, getting better at something that you will always have a weak spot on adds longevity. So you can always add load to a bar. There's only so much load you can add to a leg press. So for I love them in that sense. But I do think they are the curse that everyone thinks they're the best thing since sliced bread.
Yeah.
And they progress the client so fast that they don't get anywhere near that stimulus. If someone can't properly do a back squat, why don't I regress them to a goblet squat? Why don't I regress them to a hack squat? Why don't I regress them to a leg press? They can get way more out of that, especially if the goal is to build muscle. And then if you want to progress them down the line, awesome.
I get people send me videos sometimes of like their friend or whoever like deadlifting. I had someone this morning, one of my online clients, send me a video of his younger brother doing a deadlift, and his back's all flexed over. He's doing it quite poorly, quite dangerously, but he's lifting heavy weight. He's lifting 140, 150-ish heavy weight for a young lad. He said, "Oh, Steve, how can he improve this?" And I said what I said. Stop deadlifting and try this instead. He needs to learn how to brace and pivot, and maybe he can learn that here. Good mornings, back extensions, simple stuff. I think, again, people are doing these big exercises without thinking of the consequences, of long training longevity. They are going to break down. And that's our jobs as coaches and people that are on social media to teach them, innit? You know what I mean? That these are the things you do have to think about, Do
you find like now you have a better understanding of how to regress things and where the weak links in the chain are? Nowadays, I used to try and focus on teaching everyone and like get people like they just didn't get it, and I'll be spending so much time trying to coach them. And I'm like, if they don't get it quickly, it's because I've progressed them way too quickly. So I regress to a point where it's so easy for them to do, like they get it like that, and then I work up. And I found where if someone, I had like a client that generally really couldn't move, couldn't squat, couldn't do anything. So I got them good at leg extensions, I got them good at incline hypers and hip thrusts, I got them good at leg curls, I got them good at a goblet squat. Right, and each of those little individual things, like learn to move your knee, learn to move your ankle, learn to move your hip. And after a while, when I went into a back squat, I took him into a safety bar. Like he was never getting under a bar. He was so kyphotic. And I was like, okay, let's just try this. And I was like, this is going to be terrible. And it was perfect.
Yeah.
Because two things. One, I got him strong at each individual component. So all he had to do was put them all together. And two, I mastered his setup. I knew he was long, so I elevated his heels. I knew how long his femurs were, so I took him a wider stance. I also knew he couldn't get under a bar, so I gave him a safety bar. And because of those things, there was nothing in his head that was difficult to understand. He just had to move. Apologies for the drilling. For anyone listening to this, I don't know what's happened in my house.
It's all good. That's the thing that, and rightfully as well. Like, people don't understand that weight training, resistance training, strength training for any goal requires lots of skill and central nervous system stimulation. It's all a skill, whether that's endurance, you could have endurance skill, strength skill, movement skill, and style of skill. What's their strategy to execute that skill? You know what I mean? So that's really, really important for training longevity, being skillful with what you do. And people, like you're saying, like they put the barbell lifts, the squat, bench, and deadlift. And I might have done this in the past, put it up there as this is what we need to get to. And there's that's good that we can strive towards this, because it's, it has, it's fun. It gives us a guide to work towards, but not everyone needs to achieve that. You know what I mean? Not everyone needs to front squat, back squat, deadlift.
Exactly. I've had people get great results without any of those lifts. People get with an incline dumbbell press and a hip thrust and a goblet squat and a leg press, and then it's all they need. And I think sometimes people feel like a failure because they think they need to go to these levels, or why can't I do what he does? I'm like, you're not comparing yourself to that person. And I think,
I think people that preach those exercises or method or any method, like weightlifters, this is the best way to produce for athletes, for power or powerlifters. This is the best way to get max strong, or like there's different ways to create different magnitudes of force, right? Like as we know, it's simple, isn't it? Like when mass is large and the weight is heavy, your speed acceleration is going to be small, and the reverse when the mass is small and the acceleration will be large. So powerlifting, heavy loads, probably slower speeds, and the opposite would be like maybe when the mass is small, the speed is fast, maybe like athletics, or something like that. And then there's the bit in between, which is more physique and bodybuilding, right? You need to use moderate weights and moderate speeds, I think when you understand that, then you don't need to follow one approach. You don't always have to think, barbells are the way for this, or weightlifting is the way for this. You know what I mean? Like we can use different approaches.
Do you think it's goal dependent? I once did a 3-hour seminar with Tom Hibbert. Obviously, he's a primarily strength guy. And the methods he used for progression when he looks at strength training are very load-based, percentage-based. It's very, very mathematical and analytical. But when I spoke to him about hypertrophy, he was like, well, you just need to train within 1 to 5 reps of failure. So what is the training system that allows your client to train hard? It doesn't, as long as they can recover from it, it doesn't really matter what it is. Do you agree with that? Do you think it's goal dependent on how we progress things?
I think that's like I understand that way of thinking, but I think it's quite a narrow way of thinking. What about the individual's longevity? How like we're talking about progressive overload, and that principle, like I said, isn't just about adding weight or stimulating muscle or whatever. There's a big psychological component to it as well. And people will get stagnant, and the central nervous system still needs to be stimulated. So that could be exercise variation, etc. So whether you're training for hypertrophy or not. So goal dependent, yes, but for progress and longevity, no, because things still need to be fun, right? Why not? If you can systemize something and progress it, then why not do it? Why not have a plan?
I also think as well that the majority of the people listening to this, the majority of the population, pure strength athletes, they probably do want to get a little bit bigger, but they don't really care as long as the numbers on the bar go up. Bodybuilders probably do want to get stronger, but they don't care so much as long as they actually look better at the end of the day. Most people fall somewhere in the middle, where even if they've got a goal closer to the bodybuilder, if their strength isn't going up, what that does to somebody psychologically that may affect the nutrition, like we spoke about with yourself earlier, could be massive. So if we know that nutrition is such a driving force behind the way we look, then we need something that allows the client to feel like they're progressing over time, so they can build confidence and feel like they're going somewhere. And in turn, the nutrition, the recovery, all these things tend to come together. I had a client here in Hong Kong, big drinker, right? Big social drinker, all the way through his diet, big social drinker. He's now better with his drink when he's not dieting, the time where he can get away with it. Why? Because he's got to a level now where he's training really, really hard. He's progressing week on week. So he doesn't want to ruin it. He doesn't like that feeling of coming in a bit worse for wear. So because of that, he's starting slowly but surely to dial in all the other factors of his life without me ever having to ask him.
Interesting. Yeah, I think, go on. Next one. Let's move on.
But so on that note, though, do you choose different methods of progression in different phases yourself? So if someone's in an accumulation phase, like a high volume phase or an intensification phase, or someone's fat loss versus muscle gain versus strength, is there different things you'll use in different phases in terms of progression? Is there a certain phase where you'll progress more load and density and rest periods and tempos compared to others?
It definitely depends on obviously the goals and the individual's ability to recover. You know what I mean? If I've got a young lad, then I'm going to push more intensity based methods. Like I might use drop sets more, and I might use stuff like that. Whereas someone who's older, to progress them, I might use maybe different styles of supersets. Like that. So I have a general rule, and then I just tweak it depending on the individual. And
what's your general rule?
To, like we've discussed on previous chats, use just a simple, subtle, linear model of progression, and I progress the load because that's the easiest to control. I keep every other variable the same, and I just progress load.
You progress week to week, block to block, or a bit of both?
Week to week. If they're technically sufficient, I progress week to week. Yeah, quite simple. If you change something and increase, for example, if we increase volume load by more than 10%, the chances of injuries goes up dramatically. So you can't just, go from an exercise to something else that allows them to lift a ton more weight, because the risk of injury goes up. So yeah, they might be ready to do it, but there's more than 10% increase in, the change of that exercise or rep scheme was incorrect.
So like you mentioned earlier on about progressing tempo. So, and obviously now you said in your blocks, you're currently progressing weight. What are the other metrics of progression that someone could look at? Let's say they've been hitting the same weight for the same few weeks. They've got their execution down because they've taken our tips from earlier on, and they're lifting with a decent tempo. They're now feeling a little bit stagnant in their training. And let's now assume this is a training issue, because we can go down a wormhole of sleep and nutrition and all this stuff that could affect it. What other methods of progressive overload could you do in that example?
I might, the simplest one I would do is give them a longer rest period. Yeah, I would just simply increase their rest period. If the goal was to, okay, I want to get a progression here on load, or I want them to hit their rep target, before I change anything, I will just give them longer rest periods to see if they can replenish energy and then, hit the rep range or hit the heavier load. That's the first thing I would do. And then the second thing I would do is speed up the tempo. So I would take out that, if we're going down in 5 seconds, for example, I'll say, don't worry about your tempo, get down, get back up. Yes, use a bit more momentum and more of your stretch reflex and move that weight faster.
Why that choice? Because you can make an argument for both sides of the coin. So why do you tend to lean towards quicker?
If they're technically good, then I'll use that. And if they don't have any joint problems or any problems lifting, then I'll use that as well. Because if they can generate more speed on the movement, that's also, like I said, a way of them progressing, because they are now producing more mechanical tension. Mechanical tension isn't just load on the bar. Mechanical tension is also speed. That's what people forget to talk about when they talk about mechanical tension. All right, heavy deadlifting because of mechanical tension. Well, mechanical tension is also a lighter load, but moving that weight fucking fast. Yeah. That's how we can create mechanical tension and activate those high threshold muscle units. So speed is a component of the progress,
What?
And it's a confidence thing, right? And it's a confidence thing. Move that weight fucking fast. Get it down, get it back up. If it's for a couple of reps or a last set, so what? As long as they're not getting injured.
So with that,
next week, slow it down.
With that in mind, we've said at the start of this that mechanical tension is the thing that is the biggest driver of hypertrophy. And you're saying that increasing training or rep speed will create more mechanical tension as well as load. What would you say? Because for ages, everyone was talking about eccentrics, that longer eccentrics had a better driving force for hypertrophy. So essentially, you're saying the opposite. And I think I know where you're going with this, but why? Because there's going to be people asking that question. I heard going slow on the eccentric was better.
Going slower on an eccentric is good because you'll create more muscle tension on the negative. But it's less metabolically. You use less energy on the way down on an eccentric, which is why it's easier to lift heavier load. So it's less.
That's where the biggest misconception is, isn't it, about an eccentric? Because it actually is lighter because you're not overcoming force, you're resisting force.
Resisting force, and your body uses less energy to do that. Yep. Now, I wrote a little article on my website that people can have a look at. I wrote it on overloading methods, like eccentric overloading methods. And I talk all about eccentric contractions there, where people can have. It has a little.
Give us the clip. Give us the clip notes.
I'm going to pull it up quickly on my.
I think whilst you're doing that, I think this is the important thing to talk about here is that when we're looking at mechanical tension, we're essentially looking at improving training volume, right? So for those who don't know, training volume, sets times reps times load is the simplest way of looking at it. There's potential, many definitions of it. But everyone used to think that muscle damage was the biggest thing that drove hypertrophy, right? So I damaged my muscles and they would grow back stronger. But let's say I gave you a really long eccentric leg workout with tons and tons and tons and tons and tons and tons of volume, that may sound good, but the amount of load you lift in your A series compared to your C series would be drastically dropped. Then if I went to try to do another leg session later in the week, you'd still be so battered mentally and physically that the performance of that session would go down. So the potential argument of doing something like this, where you maybe create less muscle damage, but you allow overall, you lift more load, you create more mechanical tension, and then you can do the same later in the week. Overall, your training volume for the week is dramatically more than if you did a massive leg day and couldn't go to the toilet for 14 days.
Have you used many eccentric methods before?
In my own training? Yes.
Like, what sort of methods have you used?
I mean, oh my God. I mean, like, I've done phases where I've done incredibly slow eccentrics. I've done phases with eccentric hooks.
Cool.
I've used a lot of bands and chains for those sort of things a little bit as well. But I'm sure there's tons more I haven't played with.
And that's it. Like we've spoken before, there's different types of eccentric contractions, right? You get slow eccentrics, fast eccentrics, supramaximal eccentrics, which is, lifting hooks and stuff like that. It's one of the reasons why I don't like people when they do, they use. Now, I'm not saying it doesn't work. I'm not saying this doesn't work. I just don't like the way people explain it and the way they term it and the way they use it as a progression. They use negative reps on the chin up to help someone progress to doing a chin up. So they always say do isometric holds. Then the next progression step is to do eccentrics or whatever, Because if you're doing a body weight eccentric because you can't do one pull-up, right? If you can't pull yourself up and you decided to do negatives on the way down, that is a supra-maximal eccentric contraction.
So explain that for people that don't know the terminology.
A supramaximal eccentric contraction is using a weight that is heavier than what you can lift. That is an advanced method. That's an advanced method. That's like, well, it's not, but you could say that's like going in and making someone do a 1 rep max. Why not? Because it's an advanced technique.
It's worse than that. That's like getting a spotter that can upright row more than your bench press to put more load on the bar than you can handle.
That's what I'm saying, bro. I'm saying you don't get someone going and do a 100-meter sprint. Like, I got an old client who can do a max effort sprint, right? He can still do his attempt of a max effort fucking sprint. Doesn't mean why would I let him do that? That's just stupid. Right? So like that, how do I progress him to it if that's the goal? It's like the chin up. Well, what you think an ISO? Now we can do supramaximal eccentrics. Like how? That's not the step process to achieve chin-ups. This is an advanced method that you're trying to use on someone who can't do chin-ups. Do you get what I'm saying?
What is your progression to getting someone their first chin-up?
I would just make them really strong with their whole upper body, man. Like strong fucking pull downs, strong rows, and then can they hold the top position of a chin up with load? You know what I mean? I think now this is the thing. I'm not saying that eccentrics on the chin up won't work, because they can work for some people. But I actually think if we took all of these thousands of people, millions of people who do them, and all these hundreds and thousands of coaches that promote this progression of ISOs, try these eccentrics, how many of you get results? I want to see your results. I want to see your client do the ISOs. Now I want to fucking see your client do the eccentrics. And I don't care if it's in 12 weeks or 12 months. I want to see them progress because of that method of the eccentrics. You're not going to fucking see it. You're not going to fucking see it. It doesn't fucking work like people promote. It doesn't work.
I absolutely agree with you. And I always remember, like, most of the people that I've gotten doing chin-ups, and there's a good few of them, most of them, I never trained for it. One day, it just says, you want to do a chin-up? Let's try, see if you can do one first. I remember we had my client May, still a client of mine online, really strong deadlifter. She got up to 145 kilo deadlift from the floor, like strong woman. And we just did work on. She got lighter. Obviously, she lost 20 kilos, and she got really strong at pull downs. So she did her first photo shoot, and the photographer asked her, "Can you do a chin up?" She goes, "Oh, I don't think so." He goes, "Okay, what we'll do is we'll get you to jump up to the top, like Simon can help you, and then I'll take a photo quickly, and then you just come down." So I help her up to the top, and she sits there and she's holding it for like 5-10 minutes. He snaps loads of shots. So she was really surprised she could hold this position. Never trained for it, never done it. We just done pull downs, deadlifts, rows. She comes in after the shoot on the Monday. I went, "Show me any chin-ups you can do." I was like, "I don't think I can do any." "Show me." 11.
Wow, that's amazing.
That's amazing. And it's the same with everything else. And when I look back at the people I did eccentric with, probably never got them doing chin-ups.
Exactly. The goal is to do a chin-up. An eccentric, you're learning how to do a chin down. You're not.
What do you think of banded chin-ups? Because I hate them in the same way that.
If you can do bands are good to help you. If you can do one chin-up and you can't do any more, I think bands are a good idea. If it's going to help you get volume and repetitions, but to go from 0 to 1, bands aren't a good idea because it doesn't match the strength curve.
I much prefer
exercise.
A chin-up machine. When you put your knees on them, because that is consistently helping you from bottom to top, as opposed to this, that when you actually really need the help, there was nothing there. Yeah. And they curl into all sorts of positions trying to get that top position. It's not helping anyone. It's actually I think it's enforcing bad habits, because when they need the help, they don't have the help. So they just curl up into a weird, like, spasticated ball. Yeah.
I think like top position isometrics are really, really good to get people comfortable up there in a good scapular position, feeling the back working, feeling the arms working. Pull downs are obviously good because you can really build some good foundational pulling strength. I think that's a good start. So there's my take on trainers who think part of a progression is eccentric chin-ups. And I can say that because I've got girls that can do 25 kilo chin-ups. I've got girls that can do 15 reps. I think that's pretty good.
Mate, I know.
Yeah, like, you know what I mean? I think people take these statements and just put it out there. Well, they've never fucking done it with success. So,
Question I was going to ask you. This is maybe sound like an obvious one, but I think it's one that I get asked so often. Does soreness equal a good workout?
It may indicate a fun workout, right? Which is a big part of, training, having a fun workout, feeling sore. Well, my view is probably similar to yours. I don't think it does, but it is nice to feel like that, right? The psychology we have behind feeling sore. But I tell you what, I train a mother and a daughter, and we've spent 12 months just doing lots of hypertrophy work, strength work, learning how to train sort of stuff, lift heavy weights, moderate loads, all different sort of methods over the last 12 to 18 months. And then I decided to move them into some reps to failure, so challenge sets and stuff like that. And they were doing like real high reps with fairly decent weights, like real high reps. And they were smashed after the workouts. They were leaving feeling depressed. Like they hated it. They didn't like it. And they come in 2 days later and they weren't sore. They thought they were going to be the sorest they have ever been. They weren't sore, so, that's the reverse case, where people think like lots of reps and lots of work is going to make them have a good, effective workout. But, it doesn't mean they didn't have a good, effective workout because they weren't sore, right?
There's so many factors into what makes a good workout as well, right? Like, I think you get two kinds of people. You get the people who chases soreness. So if I don't feel sore, then maybe the workout wasn't good. Where, as we said earlier on, that there's an element where soreness actually is a hindrance, because it actually means that your overall training volume will come down because you can't lift as much load on the next session. And there's also, if you're increasing a load, your mechanical tension or execution is getting better, you don't need to be sore. And every time you get a new block, you might feel sore because it's a new stimulus. But you get the other people, there's the other people that get sore and they hate it with a passion, a new block, and think that this is where it has to be. When actually, like 2-3 weeks in, this is gonna subside a little bit.
I mean, as you know, there's a lot of variables to being sore, isn't it? Training volume. I'm sure when you think about this, you probably have the same bunch of clients that you get. Some clients that get really sore when they're doing lots of work and lots of volume. And then you get some clients that get really, really sore when they lift heavy ass weights for low reps. And then you got the ones in between as well, right? Like, so like the girls there, they didn't get sore and they probably banged out fucking 300-400 reps on their legs, they didn't get sore. They were fine. But if I give them like fucking 10 sets of 3, for example, with a real heavy weight with 3-minute recoveries, they'll be fucking sore all week.
It's a different sore. It's a different sore as well, right? When I do like a Milos giant set, high volume workout, I'm sore. I'm waddling. I can't sit down on the toilet. Like it sucks. But on the flip side of that, if I do a heavy strength workout, especially if I'm in a stable exercise, I did a phase once where I did 5x5 on a pendulum squat, like a banded pendulum squat. So
horrible.
Yeah, but low volume, high intensive, low volume. I felt sore, but I wasn't battered. It's a really different sore. I just felt just overall fatigued. It was a deep soreness, but I could move. So soreness depends on the activity. Soreness doesn't dictate a good workout, I don't think.
Yeah. It's that fitness fatigue model, isn't it, of recovery, like there's a research, I don't know who like coins it or termed it. They basically say there's like a 3 times the recovery to recover from something. So like say if you do a bench workout and then it took you 2 days to recover fatigue and muscular soreness, it will actually take 3 times that to fully recover. So it's a 2-day turnaround for feeling better, but it's actually a 6-day recovery before you should maybe go in and do the exercise again and really get the benefits, but obviously that's exercise dependent as well. You know what I mean? That if you lift really heavy deadlift session, that could take you a lot longer than doing calves or forearms, so
yeah. Absolutely. And if it's a new muscle you haven't trained, if you've never trained calves before, or if you've never trained calves before, or you've had a long layoff from something, that's going to hurt.
Sorry, go on.
I had a pretty long layup and I went home. Like I did a few sessions, nothing major, and that was just my bigger lifts, really, right? I did an arm session on Sunday, the first proper arm session I've done in a very, very long time. My biceps were destroyed. And this was the workout, right? For the biceps, I did A series, incline curls, preacher, single arm preacher, B series, and hammer curls on the C. That was it. Two sets.
Yeah.
6 to 10.
Beat up all week.
Whew, man, like 3 or 4 days. Really sore. But if I do that next week, I'll probably be fine in 24 hours.
I had a female last year. She just did she probably did like a set of 25, one set of 25, I think it was 30 reps, like a standing calf raise or something. She was at the physios the next day. She thought she tore her calves off. She went to the physios. You know what I mean? Like she thought she like tore her fucking Achilles off or whatever. I was like, that's just extreme muscle soreness.
I also think as well, girls probably find calf workouts harder because they're wearing heels. They're on them. Like you know how people always complain about leg soreness? When people complain about leg soreness, that's the one that people often freak out about. But it's because leg soreness, you have to walk on your legs, right? How often do you get chest soreness? You literally the next day you feel fine, you don't even feel sore. And then you stretch or yawn, and you're like, oh my God.
Yeah.
Like,
you say, how you feeling? They go like that, and then they're like, oh, actually.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I remember, similar to your story with the calves, because like I've had problems with my T-spine for nearly as long as I've known you. And I sometimes now when I'm starting to move better and I'm starting to get into muscles that I struggle to, and I find exercises that work around my structure, and I get into those exercises, sometimes I go, man, my back's really rough today. And sometimes it's hard to separate DOMs from the pains I normally get when I'm just not looking after myself. So it can be quite similar. And it's sometimes good to look back and go, okay, look, I trained that yesterday. That's probably why everything's feeling really, really stiff. And I think people misunderstand soreness so much. I think it's a problem or they think it's necessary. And as everything, the answer's in the middle.
Yeah, definitely. And I think it's like, if you train the majority of your year using heavy loads, and that's where you come back and do volume-based work. So just to allow your body to recover. Whereas the reverse is probably true, like for those people that train a ton of volume, like maybe bodybuilders and people that just push fat loss sort of stuff and very moderate to high rep stuff, having a break's probably doing the heavy lifting actually, you know what I mean, for their bodies. So
that's the big thing, biggest misconception I think people have about deloading is they look at it as in terms of a very like standardized set of terms in that I'm going to deload. That means I'll do half the weight or do half the load or I just have an easy week. Now, I'm not saying you can't have a week outside the gym as a deload. If you want to take a break from the gym and get outside and do stuff, then that's brilliant. I'm all for that. But if you don't want to, like, there's different ways of overtraining. If you're overtraining on the high volume stuff, you'll get joint pain. You'll be sore for longer. You'll get some like tendinitis type of stuff if you're really pushing it. So then doing the heavy stuff gives you a break from that. If you do all the heavy stuff, you'll see more nervous system stuff. You'll see sleep being impaired. You'll see brain fog and fatigue, and they're both overtraining, but they're very different. And then you just need to switch the stimulus. And this is why I think a lot of people like yourself use an undulating model of accumulation intensification when you're not doing linear.
And that's it. And like coming back to the story that everyone uses for progressive overload, the Milo story, the Grecian Italian, the Milo story, right? He as a child, he would carry the buffalo.
Oh, yes.
Up the hill every day. And every day he would do it, the buffalo would get bigger, but the overload principle, like he would get stronger every day, right? He's lifting more weight every day, but he would adapt to it. But I mean, in simplified terms, yes. But that actually contradicts the method of periodization, because we don't actually do that. We don't just keep doing it. Milo never took a rest day, bro. Would
that be nice though? We'd all be Eddie Hall within a year.
Yeah, it would be, wouldn't it? Yeah, but it doesn't work like that, does it? So we need to think of it as a wave, a progress, as long as we're still going positive, but we need to waive the progressive overload.
On that note, because I think this is where coaches tend to struggle. So let's say I can do 4-phase blocks. So we go through, let's say, intensification 1, accumulation 1, intensification 2, accumulation 2, or vice versa if you want to end on intensification. So you're maximizing intensity, right? So you've, over time, let's say you've gone 70%, 74%, 72%, 78%. Let's say so you've increased it over time, right? Now, there's going to be a point eventually where you cannot keep increasing. When you start getting to the 90% realms, there's a point where you hit a wall. What do you do in those situations? Because you've got to keep training going for years and years and years and years and years. And you can't just increase load forever.
Yeah, that's called a... there's something called a performance growth curve.
Okay.
And that's what stops people, that's what stops an individual from constantly breaking world records. You know, you only have so much genetic potential and there's only so much you can do. Is that answer your question? Or is it more simplified than what you're asking me?
If you're looking from a program perspective, right? So let's say I go through a year's worth of training, right? And eventually I end up on, I don't know, 90, 95%. You're getting really close to your 1 minute max territory. You've done this undulating model, you've increased the intensity. Where do I go from there?
Well, that's where we can play around with your frequency, your intensity, the time that you train, the type of training that you use, the type of exercise and stuff like that, right? You know, you could bring in like let's take frequency. You could decrease the amount of, you know, that lift that you're doing and then get benefits, right? You know, potentially, you know, you could deadlift less, you know, maybe squat more. That may help your deadlift go up, because we know that squatting will help deadlifting most of the time, whereas deadlifting may not always help your squat. So you can like maybe tweak the frequency, you know, like there are a lot of strong motherfuckers that deadlift once every 2 weeks. There's some people that like to squat every 2 weeks or bench press 3 times a week. You know what I mean? There's different frequency variables that you can play with, or you could play with the time of your training session. You know, maybe do you know, if you were lucky enough to have the time, maybe you could do 2 training sessions a day. You know, you could do, if you're trying to improve your bench, let's just take strength, for example. Yeah. Like if you're trying to improve your bench, maybe you could do some heavy lifting in the morning, and then in the PM, you can do more moderate to light loads, right? AM, PM sessions, or you can manipulate the type of exercises that you're using. You know, you can manipulate the moment arms. You know, you could go from doing a barbell back squat and front squat that you've been doing for the last 12 months. And how about you now start using a safety bar or a cambered bar and things like that. So there are ways to manipulate it. It just depends on what you have access to and your level of training experience, you know?
When people look at manipulating strength curves, with the rise of mechanics, this is something that's become so popular to use bands, chains, reverse bands, cables. What ways do you use to create a full range challenge when you have minimal equipment? Because obviously you've got a decent home gym now, but as we spoke about last week, that's developed over time. So if we look at, let's say, delts, for example, we know from the resistance profile and the strength profile do not match. So the position where we are weakest, the weight is heaviest, and then this bit's pretty much, the bottom bit's pretty much useless. So if you don't have, the easy way to say this is we'll do a cable lateral raise, which allows a drop off at the top. What could you do if you have minimal equipment? If people have got exercises like that, how do they start to begin thinking about troubleshooting this and finding solutions?
How can you manipulate your body angle so that we change the axis of where we are creating torque?
So how would you do that with a client?
Well, I mean, yes, we may, when you hold onto a rack, you may lean over to the side, create a angle on the torso, and then do your dumbbell raise if you only have a dumbbell. Or you can use a bench and go the opposite way. So there's ways to manipulate. Like, I think a lot of people, which is okay, to do. I think a lot of people simplify biomechanics and applied biomechanics. I think it's a lot more complex than we think. People just assume there is one, like, the moment arms and all this. There's internal moment arms and there's external moment arms. All right, external moment arms when we have a dumbbell. Internal moment arms are, tendon attachments and shit like that. And we all have different tendon attachments, depending on your genetics. Some people have long Achilles tendons, some people have short Achilles tendons. There are different class levers, there's a first class lever, second class lever, and a third class lever. These will change how your body produces force and torque and how the muscle works. Like the calf is different to the bicep, and the bicep is different to the bench press, so, what I mean? Like, it's good to simplify these things for people, but it's almost like too simplified, sometimes.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think it's just finding like what is you're looking at optimal versus practical, right? One of the things I would always use using that example of the lat raise, either the lean, which I quite like. I also like if I did a dumbbell lat raise, let's say whatever load you can lift for, let's say you can do 4s up here, fatigue this top part of the motion where you're weaker, go and grab yourself a set of 12s or 15s and just do swings partial weight. And then you can challenge the length and range. You can find a weight that challenges that part after you fatigue the top part, and then you get the whole round spectrum. In the same way that if you wanted to do your full range challenge for your lats, you do pull downs, and then you also do rows.
But this is the thing as well, like, peak torques and peak tensions. You're like, that bottom position is still important to train, because what muscle works down here in the first 30 degrees is a small little muscle. It's the supraspinatus. It still needs to be trained, not because of hypertrophy reasons, but for structural reasons.
Yeah.
Right. So we still need to train that range, and that's the argument of why partial repetitions and not full range of motion isn't,
full range of motion for what, right? This is the problem with full range of motion people have. People go, you got to train full range for the exercise, or full range for what? Full range for the muscle. What muscle? Full range of motion, like there isn't anything that's truly full range of motion, unless you're looking externally, which is for most people's training, is some ways irrelevant.
Yeah.
You get a full range challenge for a muscle for most people, and that doesn't always mean full range of an exercise.
Yeah, totally. And that's a good topic to discuss, actually, biomechanics and levers and moment arms.
Maybe that's next week. So on that note, so I know you got to shoot off. Just a closing question: if there was one bit of advice you get someone like they're a bit stagnating in their workout and they want to work out how to progress. Obviously, this is going to be very unique, but if there's one bit of advice you reckon most people aren't doing in their gym sessions that could really take them up a step, what would it be?
There are a few things that I'd love to say, but let's keep it this simple so people have something to take away and use. Choose an exercise and get really, really technically good at it. Once you are really good at it, do 3 sets of 10. Once you get good at 3 sets of 10, do 4 sets of 8. When you get really good at 4 sets of 8, do 5 sets of 6. And when you get really good at that, start back again and use a heavier load than the first time that you did it. And just rotate that. I think it's quite simple. Get good at a specific rep range with a certain load and then change it.
And that's the thing. Most people don't take the log.
The exercise the same. You can keep the exercise the same.
That's a really good point as well. And we can go on to virtual things, but people like to program up and create variety for the sake of variety. If you're getting stronger, you're good. Well, Steve, thank you very much again. This has been a lot of fun. And I'll see you obviously next week. And I'll put obviously our handles in the description below, and also send me that article about eccentric stuff, the link to that, and I'll also put that.
I will do.
So people read it.
Thank you.
Cheers, Steve.
Cheers.